We're at the 2016 Ripcord Association reunion in Springfield, Missouri. We are talking today with Lin Bashford of Powell, Wyoming, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Lin, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Bluff, Nebraska on August 20th, 1946.
Okay, did you grow up that area, or did you move around?
No, at 2 we moved to Wyoming, just across the line in Wyoming. My folks had been farmers in Nebraska and things weren't going well, so they went, my dad went to work for the Bureau of Reclamation as a lineman, and then I lived the rest of the time in Cheyenne through high school.
All right, and when did you finish high school? Or did you finish high school?
Yeah, I finished high school in 1964 when I graduated. And
then what did you do when you graduated?
After graduation, I went to Casper Junior College for 2 years, and then to the University of Wyoming for another 2.5 years.
Okay, and did you get your degree?
I got a degree in range management, Bachelor of Science.
Okay. Now, along the way, did Uncle Sam send you a draft notice, or how did that work?
Oh, about every 6 months I got an update on whether I was still in school or not, and whether I was draftable. Fortunately, at that time, we were still having student deferments, so as long as my grades stayed up and I was still in college, I didn't get drafted.
Because there was normally about a 4-year limit on that. Did you have to ask them to let you stay on for that last term to finish? Or?
Yeah, I don't remember that I had to ask that.
Okay.
But the draft board kept pretty close tabs. In Wyoming, it's small enough that they knew pretty much everybody.
Right. Okay. So when do you actually have to report for service?
Well, after I graduated from college, I had acquired a permanent job with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and was busy doing that job in Hewlett, Wyoming, and tried to go sign up for the Guard, and the sergeant or lieutenant, I don't remember who he was, at the Guard unit in Newcastle, in that northeast part of the state, said, "You're not, you're already on the list to be drafted in this month." So it was too late. By that time, then the mail came to my folks' house, and they forwarded it to me.
Right.
I'm sure they didn't want to, but they did.
Okay. Now, had you done a draft physical sometime earlier?
No, I think the best I recall is after I got my draft notice, went to Denver with a lot of guys from Casper, Wyoming, and all over the state, and did a physical there, and I didn't get to come home from there.
So off to
just
boot camp.
like,
Okay. So when was it that you went down to Denver?
it would have been April
Of 69?
69.
Okay. All right. So you got it. Now, when you went for the physical, one of the standard stories is that there are people who tried to scam the system in one way or another, or pretend to have ailments they didn't have, or things like that. Did you notice any of that, or was it just pretty straightforward?
I really didn't pay attention to any of that. I'm sure there was plenty of scamming going on, but the biggest thing I remember about going for that physical is they got everybody in one room and said, "Okay, we've got X number, I don't remember, 10 or something slots that we're having to draft for the Marines. So do we have any volunteers?" Well, we had a couple of volunteers to do that. And they said, "Okay, we'll just take everybody from the top of the alphabet." And Bashford was about number 3 in the alphabet that time, and I really didn't want to go in the Marines, but as a draftee particularly. And then somebody's friend had already volunteered, so they said, "Oh, I want to go." And
So somehow you managed to dodge that bullet.
So I'll go in the Army, I don't care,
Yeah.
wherever.
Of course, the irony is that by that stage in the war, the Marines are kind of pulling back and out, and the 101st Airborne that you will
Yeah, and I
join
didn't know.
will get
Yeah,
more
that's
trouble.
little did I know at that time, yeah.
Right. Okay. So they were drafted. So I mean, this is they were sometimes drafting Marines, which some people don't always know.
Right.
But okay. So that happens, and then where do you go from basic training?
I went to Fort Ord, California.
Okay. And what do they do with you when you arrive there?
They were real kindly put us on a bus and hauled us to the receiving station, and from there it wasn't so kind.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to just break you down and make you all one unit, But,
Now, were you expecting any of that when you went in?
yeah, I was. My dad had been in the Army in World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and he told me, what to expect in basic training, as well as friends that I knew had come back and been through basic in the Army or the Marines, and so I kind of had an idea what to expect.
Okay. Now, at this point, do they shout at you, or do they physically abuse people, or?
Yeah, I don't remember any physical abuse. They'd throw your gear if you weren't going fast enough. They'd grab your duffel bag and throw it ahead, and but they hollered at you a lot. Kind of like I remember working cows into a chute. You just get behind them and push, and holler, make noise.
Okay. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that kind of treatment and the discipline and so forth?
It was kind of difficult because I was already 21 or 20 at that time, so it was more difficult for me because I'd been on my own through college, living in an apartment, totally on my own. So
yeah. So now you're going to crowd it with all of these people and having to follow orders and that sort of thing.
Right.
Now, when you were in college, I mean, was there any kind of anti-war movement going on there, or anything that you noticed?
Not a lot, but there was some at the University of Wyoming. They had that and racial movements, during that period of time. That's where when the Black 7 football team walked off the University of Wyoming football team field in protest of racial incidents, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there was a King assassination and a variety of other
Right.
things, and some blacks were getting a lot more militant by that time. And that shows up in different ways in different places. Okay, so
There was always the flower children, we called them. The hippie movement was on at that time, and there was lots of those folks around the university.
Okay.
And while I was at the university, I actually shot with the ROTC rifle team, so we kind of heard some of that.
Okay, so did you do ROTC as part of your time?
I didn't do ROTC.
Okay.
But I got on the rifle team because one of my roommates was in ROTC, and we had shot together before at Casper College. So it was just a natural progression to go ahead and continue shooting on the rifle team.
Okay, yeah, so your experience was a little different from some others there. Now, how much did you know about Vietnam at the time you went into the Army?
Just mainly what I heard on the news, or read. So I really didn't know a lot about it, or from conversations with other friends. Other than that, I knew one young kid that was probably 3 years younger than me, 2 to 3 years younger than me. Earlier had been killed in Vietnam after like 2 or 3 months in country, and was a close friend of the family. So that had an impact on everybody that knew me or myself too.
All right, so it could be dangerous.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so now what does the actual basic training consist of? Aside from yelling at you, what do you end up doing?
We did a lot of physical training, a lot of drill training so that you become a cohesive unit, a lot of firearms training, a lot of, I don't remember all the book training we did, but I'm sure there was some.
Yeah, well, they usually do things like you learn the military code of justice.
Military code of justice.
That kind of
all-
thing, and
all
who you
that
salute.
Yeah,
All right. Now, were you in good physical shape when you went in?
yeah, I was.
Okay. Now, do you think that the drill instructors basically treated you fairly or consistently, or were there some that were jerks and some that were better?
There was always some that were better than others.
All right.
And I did notice that they kind of like to take it out on the guys that had evaded the draft, not really evaded, but went through college.
Mm-hmm.
So it always come up, oh, the college graduate here, he can't do this, or he can do this, or something. The rest of you guys should be able to do this, whatever.
Did it help you at all with them that you knew how to shoot?
It didn't seem to make any difference to
Okay.
them. Didn't seem to matter.
No, notice that.
They
much.
wanted to make sure that you did it how they wanted it done,
Mhm.
even if you knew that wasn't quite the best way to shoot.
Okay, so you knew too much. All right. How long did the basic training last?
I think it was 8 weeks.
Okay. And what's your next step after that?
Next step after that was your assignment to your AIT, advanced training.
Mhm.
And of course, mine was just automatically into infantry.
Okay. And where did you do that training?
It was at Fort Ord also.
Okay, so you stayed there.
Stayed right there.
Did they move you to a different part of the base? or-
Yeah. Yeah, just
Okay.
not very far, but it was a different part of the base.
Right. And now what are you doing now? It's not so much just drill and marching anymore.
Yeah, you were more into tactics, shooting more, learning about how to use hand grenades, how to use, you go through gas chamber, of course we went through that in basic as well, but then there was just all the aspects of infantry, including forced marches, overnight or 2 or week-long outings
Mm-hmm.
where you were playing war.
Okay. And how much of it was geared toward Vietnam?
The cadre, a lot of them had been in Vietnam, so they were trying to gear toward Vietnam, but in California it wasn't jungle,
Mm-hmm.
so there were some trees and some cover like that, but it wasn't anything like Vietnam.
Right. Okay. So, and then what variety of weapons did you learn?
We started off with M14s, then we switched right away to the M16. We learned about the M60, and the M79 grenade launcher, the law,
It's the light anti-tank
light
weapon. Yeah.
anti-tank weapons, hand grenades,
Okay.
chemical grenades,
Yeah. Did they teach you anything about using radios or mortars or that kind of thing?
No, just a brief overview of mortars. Some of the guys got sent that route as mortarmen,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, it was just, this is how you're gonna call mortars in.
Right.
A lot of map work and that sort of thing.
Okay. So in principle, if you're out in the field, you can call in fire.
Right.
Okay. Now, is that another 8 weeks?
As I recall, it was 8 weeks.
Okay.
It seemed like a long time.
All right. And now, after you finish AIT, what do you do next?
Well, at the end of AIT, they come down with a roster and you go look to see where you were going or when you had to report wherever.
Mhm.
And my name, as well as several others, fell into the NCOIC, the Shake and Bake School.
Okay. So that's where they basically will teach you to be a sergeant.
Yeah, supposedly. Yeah.
Okay.
We went to, so,
Yeah,
and
with-
mine was different from everybody else. A lot of them were going to 11 Bravo or infantry,
Mhm.
NCO school. Mine was 11 Foxtrot. I didn't know what that was, and everybody said, "Oh, that's LERPs." You know, you're good knowing you, because
Okay. So what was LERPs?
11 Foxtrot was infantry operations and intelligence,
Mhm.
which was basically long-range patrols, and
Mhm.
but it all was basically the same. I think I don't.
And did you eventually wind up just with a regular infantry assignment?
I did
Okay. So where did you do the NCO training?
in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay. And then what did that actually consist of?
Oh, lots of more training with map reading. You know, they had courses on escape and evasion, a lot of leadership school training in classroom type stuff, as well as each week they changed your position, whether you were the platoon sergeant or the squad leader or just one of the troops, you know.
Mhm.
So you got a feeling for all of those, and a lot of that had to do with marching to chow, all, you know, drills, all that. You had to. I remember they always hollered at me because I wasn't loud enough, but I got through it. So
All right. Now, was this a voluntary program?
no,
Okay. You just got assigned. They didn't ask you.
they didn't ask me.
Okay. Because in a lot of cases, people who did that, they had some choice in the matter.
They did, and I don't know how they didn't make any rhyme or reason how they
Right.
come up with
Yeah.
that. But
Okay. So you're just there. Now, did you do all of the training there at Fort Benning, or did they take you
Yes.
any? So no field trips.
well, yeah, we had some field training after we graduated from NCO school. Then we got sent to. It's pretty much a base of your choice, and for OJT on-job training with an infantry company, and I got to go to Fort Carson, Colorado, which was it was kind of ironic because it was the 5th Infantry, which was a mechanized unit.
Mhm.
So, you know, that didn't really help me in Vietnam any.
Okay. Now, when you went there, were you now just serving with a regular unit, and they do their? So you're not training new recruits. You're
No.
just with a regular unit.
Just whatever they were doing. And I remember at that time it was January, February, cold,
Mm-hmm.
and they were doing lots and lots of stuff out in the field around Fort Carson,
Mhm.
around in Colorado Springs,
Yep.
and it was cold.
So,
And you went there as a sergeant, so you caught all kinds of hell from the guys that had been through Vietnam. Most of them were returnees
mm-hmm.
that had a little bit of time left, or
Okay.
were going to be lifers or whatever.
Well, did you have many privates, or were they? If they're veterans, they're probably coming back with a higher rank than that.
Well, there was some that were higher ranked, all right, but there was a good deal of them that were spec fours
Right.
or corporals. Or,
Mhm. But what you wouldn't have were a lot of people who were new recruits.
No.
Okay. All right. Now, while you're there, did you at least get to, kind of go off base and take advantage of
Yeah.
being there?
I did. I even actually got to drive my car from Wyoming down to Colorado Springs, and then I could go home when I had time off, whether it was a
Right.
weekend or I don't remember.
Okay.
But it was a couple of days.
All right. And how long was that assignment for Carson?
As I remember, it's like about maybe 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. So just,
Wasn't long enough.
yeah, there's sort of a break before you go to Vietnam.
That's right.
All right. And now, so how do you find out you're going to Vietnam?
Well, I don't remember exactly. It just orders came down through that unit to report to San Francisco or
Yeah, Oakland was the big
Oakland,
depot. Yeah.
to Oakland, and
Okay.
then it'd be shipped over from there. And, but we knew pretty much everybody that went through NCO school, with rare exception, went to Vietnam.
Right. Okay. Now, did you get to go home before you went to Vietnam, or did they just send
Yeah.
you? Okay.
And I don't remember a couple of weeks.
Okay. And now, how do they physically get you to Vietnam?
We flew commercial, as I recall it, commercial airlines,
And do you remember where you stopped on the way?
Hawaii.
Okay.
It seemed like we were locked in the Hawaiian airport,
Mhm.
and Honolulu airport, and that was it. You know, they didn't want you to get out of there.
Right. Okay. And where do you land in Vietnam?
Benoit,
Okay. Big base outside of Saigon.
right.
All right. What's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
How hot and how stinky it was.
Mhm.
It was overwhelming. And I don't remember what the temperature was, but of course it was again, when you first got off the plane, you could see this big thermometer that they had up on the metal building. Of course, it heated it up a little
Yeah.
bit more, but it was well over 100.
Mm-hmm.
And just the stench of Vietnam, I mean,
If you try to describe that smell to somebody, what would you say it was like?
probably like the sewer lagoon in the midsummer in Wyoming, at least.
All right. So a lot of things decaying of various kinds. Okay. So now you get off the plane. What do they do with you?
Then I think they put us in deuce and a half trucks and took us off to the reception center there and assigned you to a bunk, and you had certain things you had to go attend this training and another training at certain times and meals, and that was about it. That's best I remember.
Sure. Now with the training, I mean, what would you be getting? Is this just living in Vietnam?
Yeah, and they issued some clothing at that time for that climate, and not much,
Yeah.
but.
Did you have to pull guard duty or any other details?
Yeah, there was all kinds of details, including just picking up cigarette butts, but it was just everything from guard duty to cleaning the outhouse to KP.
Okay. About how long did you stay there?
You know, it seemed like about a week before, but I'm not sure. It was a while.
Okay.
Longer than I had expected, actually. I thought they would have everything in order, you know, and you just go there and then ride off to wherever.
At what point do you find out where you're going?
It seemed like about every morning they'd call all the names that were going to a certain unit, and then you'd report over to another location and get shipped off or flown there or whatever.
All right. And what unit do you get assigned to?
I got assigned to the 101st Airborne.
All right. And what part of Vietnam were they operating in?
They were operating in the I-Corps, clear up to North Vietnam.
Okay, so you're in the northernmost section of South Vietnam.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. And how do they get you up there?
We flew, if I recall flying on big airplane,
So C-130s?
C-130s.
Okay. All right. And then where do you fly to?
I don't remember.
Oh.
It was into Camp Eagle.
Yeah. So Camp Eagle outside Phu Bai.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the headquarters base for the division.
Right.
And then once you get there, what do they do with you?
They had what they called P training, and then you started doing some of the jungle tactics and rappelling from the tower, rappelling from helicopter, simulated helicopters, just all of that stuff, go climbing the ladder, shooting some.
Did you do any patrolling or practice patrolling?
Yeah, and I don't remember if it was there or up at Evans when I got assigned to the unit.
Mm-hmm.
But we did some actual patrols out from the base with live weapons, with ammo and everything, and
All right.
set up ambushes and
Yeah. About how long do you think you spent at Camp Eagle?
not all that long. It was like long enough to get through the P training.
Okay,
Maybe,
so a few
maybe
days, a week?
maybe
Okay.
a week
All
at
right.
the most.
And then you go to Camp Evans, which is where your actual unit is based.
Right.
So what?
Before I went there, they told us what unit we were
Okay.
going to up there.
All right. And what unit were you assigned to?
I was assigned to Company D, Delta Company, 2nd of the 506th.
Okay. All right. So you go there, and so roughly when do you join them? Like, is it now April or?
Well, yeah, it was in April.
Now, was the company on the base or in the field?
They were in the field at the time, and I joined, when I first went in, of course, we were at the company rear.
Right.
And assigned to wherever they needed you at that time. And then you pulled bunker duty or KP until they got the word to send you to the unit.
Okay. So then you joined the unit in the field?
Then yeah.
And how did they get you there?
They helicoptered us, and I don't remember how many, whether it was just me or others, right to Ripcord.
Okay.
Because the unit was on Ripcord at the time. And I don't remember how long we were on Ripcord. It didn't seem like very long.
All right. Now, explain for somebody who doesn't know much about it, just sort of what was Ripcord and what did it look like?
It looked like a barren hilltop with lots of rock and concertina wire everywhere
And so, I mean,
and
and
artillery set up.
okay. So, what was the purpose? This is a fire support base, basically. What? I mean, for somebody who doesn't know much about that, what was the purpose or the function of a base like that?
To support the infantry units off of that base, to be able to be closer to them, to be able to fire supporting artillery, basically.
Right. Okay. And so then the companies rotate on and off of the top of the hill because someone has to guard it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he'd have a company on perimeter guard at the Ripcord,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other companies would be around Ripcord in the jungle.
Okay. And then now you're coming in as a sergeant, so are you supposed to be a squad leader? Is that the idea, or not yet?
Yeah, well, I wasn't, some of them did get assigned right away as a squad leader. Some didn't, and I didn't. I got with a squad, met those few people, 7, 8,
Mm-hmm.
10 folks, and then shortly after I was at Ripcord, we walked off of Ripcord, and the whole company went off and exchanged with another company.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now, once you leave the hilltop, now what kind of country are you in?
It's the triple canopy jungle.
Okay. And the mountains and hills.
Yeah, very steep, hot, humid.
Okay.
Seemed like it rained every night or every day sometime.
All right. Now, as you start patrolling in the jungle, what do you do within the squad, or does anybody?
Well, it was all mass confusion to me. Seemed like I was in. They just kind of told me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in this line, keep that guy ahead of you, kind of in sight, but don't get too close to him. So if we get hit, ambushed, or whatever, they're going to get 3 or 4 of us all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the don't bunch up part.
Don't bunch up.
Okay. So you're making your way now. Were you using trails in the jungle, or making your own trails, or?
Pretty much making our own trails. sometimes we'd cross trails and check them for tracks, see if anybody'd been down that trail before, recently, or whatever we could find, and constantly trying to be aware for booby traps or tripwires or whatever. I mean, I didn't know what I was looking for.
Right. Now, did anybody in the squad sort of try to, give you some guidance or help you get oriented, or was it just follow us and do what we do?
Yeah, there was always a couple of guys that would kind of take you under their wing and this is what you need to do, or you're screwing up here, don't do it this way, or and usually you didn't have a problem with somebody telling you were screwing up if you were, and so yeah, I had a couple of guys, Doug Puffer was one that kind of showed me some of the ropes. Sergeant Skinner, Mark Skinner helped me out a lot. And I, as of yet, wasn't a squad sergeant, so didn't have my own squad, which was fine with me, because I was of the mindset to learn all I could from anybody. It didn't matter if they were PFC, private, or the lieutenant. I wanted to know whatever I could do to save my own bacon as well as theirs.
Okay.
So.
And who was your platoon leader when you started?
Lieutenant Flaherty.
Okay. And was he good at his job, or were there issues, or?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent at the job. I'm sure other people have different opinions, but I thought he did a great job.
And your company commander at that point?
It was Captain Rawlison.
Okay. And what impression did you have of him?
Yeah, my impression of him was that he was very much gung-ho, because he carried a shotgun and wanted to get close enough to shoot the shotgun. But he was also very aware of the surroundings, of caring for the people, trying to do everything he could to make sure we all got out alive.
Okay.
I had a great deal of respect for Rawlison. Probably he's one of the main reasons that I come out alive.
All right. Now you get there in April. In April, so you're there not too long after the base got set up, because that's about April 12th when they start. So
Yeah.
by end of April, early May, that's kind of when you're up there, you think?
Yeah,
Okay.
it had to be in there somewhere. And I don't remember the dates.
Yeah. Well, those are the things that we can look up. So that's not a big deal. But then you're out, you're patrolling in the jungle. Now, in kind of May and June, were you making much contact with the enemy, or what was happening on those patrols?
Yeah, as I recall, the very first day off the base we got hit. Never saw anything, although I had saw two NVA cross the trail between me and the next guy. But they were people, and in all our training you'd saw pictures of the different kinds of NVA, but they were people, and it just didn't, it made me question for that split second, and that's when I think it was Skinner, I don't remember for sure who it was, but I turned and told him, and he's like, get your down, because they're gonna fire you up. I mean, and I knew enough that they had an RPG. One of them was carrying an RPG. And it always kind of bothered me that I took that extra second. But that's over and done, and I don't know if those guys went on and fired up some of our other guys or what. That's kind of a bad deal.
Yeah. Did you see those two before the unit made contact? Yeah. But those are your first time, and you just never know. But if you survive that and you learn something, then maybe you don't do that again.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do it again.
All right. So that's happening. So when you made contact, you said it was just would it be very brief, and then they disappear, or?
It was very brief, and then he sent. I remember the captain telling our squad leader, and I think it was Mark Skinner, to take that new sergeant with him and go out and look for blood trails.
Mhm.
So we did.
All right. Did you find anything?
Yeah, we found some, as I recall, some bloody bandages or something a ways away from where we were hit. But we never found anybody.
Mhm. Okay. Now, when you're going through the jungle like this, how far could you actually see?
Not very far. It varied, of course, but at times it was like right here. You were fighting your way through the wait a minute vines and all the jungle.
Yeah, so sometimes the underbrush is pretty thick,
Yeah.
and you could get tangled up in it and so forth. Okay. Now, how long would you stay out in the field at a time?
Months.
Okay.
I don't know. It was a long time.
Okay.
It could be a long time. Later on, I don't know how long I was out there, but about the time that, and maybe we want to get into that later a little bit, but about the time that they started evacuating Ripcord in July, the company clerk was due to D-Rose. And Captain Rawlson came to me and told me he wanted me in the rear as a company clerk. Because with the training I had, I knew all the day reports,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff from the training at Benning. Truthfully, I think he thought probably it was the safest place for me because it was a struggle with all the equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and the backpack, the pack, and all that.
How much did you weigh at that point?
I weighed I went in probably from basic training and from overseas or in the U.S. as probably 150 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And but when I came home, I was like 125, 130, somewhere in there.
All right, so he's looking at that and okay, you're the smaller guy or whatever.
Yeah, and so I don't know if that had a bearing on why he picked me to go back to the rear or not.
Okay.
I didn't argue.
All right. Well, so to go back now to the time you spend out there in the field, so what would a typical day be like when you're out there in the jungle? Or is there a typical day?
I don't know if there was a typical day. I mean, we just basically would go patrol from one hilltop to the next, which you might be able to see if it was open,
Mm-hmm.
but it took you hours to get from one night defensive perimeter to the next. And if you had to do anything special, then it took longer. So it wasn't typical.
Okay.
I mean, there was no typical day, I didn't
Yeah.
think.
What would you do at night?
Set up night defensive perimeters, and you always had certain hours that you had to be on guard, on watch in your perimeter. First you'd set up your claymore mines out away from your perimeter, and then you'd dig a foxhole, of course, and as best you could, and then just wait out the night. Stay
Yeah.
awake, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake.
Right. Now, while you were doing that, did your position ever get probed or attacked that you can recall?
Well, yeah, but I don't know if it was actual probes. It was maybe just to see if somebody was there, or it might have been some wild animal out in the jungle there that you'd see movement or hear something or set off a tripwire that you'd set out.
But you didn't get actual firefights or anything else
Not
like
that I
that?
recall in any of the night defensive perimeters that we were in,
Mm-hmm.
but
Okay.
lots of guys did.
All right. Now, when you're out there, would you sometimes hear firing or shooting going on someplace else?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, lots of times you'd hear it. another unit was in contact,
Mhm.
and sometimes they would want our company or part of our company to go help them. The most vivid thing that I remember about any of that was one part of either our company or another company had run into a bunker complex.
Mhm.
And they pulled back, and then we were on a ridge line, and they called in the jets to bomb it. And I remember that clear as day, that the jets coming in, and the huge flare, the loud explosions. They were bombing and napalming it.
Mhm. Okay. Now, right around the 1st of July, 1970, North Vietnamese start to bombard the Ripcord base on a fairly regular basis. Did you notice that when it happened, or?
Oh yeah, because we were within kilometers.
Mhm.
I mean, within range of the base all the time, and so you'd hear it all the time going on.
Mhm. All right. And your company was involved in some fighting at a place called Hill 1000,
Right.
about July 7th, 8th. Were you still with them for that?
I don't think I was. If I was, and I've lost so much memory about it,
Mhm.
I probably put it out of my mind, but
Okay.
that we held part of us back. As
Mhm.
part of them, several squads, or one of the platoons went up. So, I don't remember much about that, and so I would think I would. Hopefully I was in the rear at that time. I
Mhm.
don't know if I was or not.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it does seem from the different accounts only a limited number of people could go up at once just because of the nature of the ground.
Right.
All right, so that's sort of out there. All right. Now, are there other incidents or things that you remember from the time out in the field there?
Just how to go relieve yourself was a kind of a chore, because you had to get away from all by yourself, away from everybody else, and so it was like you're on constant vigilance
Mm-hmm.
while you did your business, and then try to get back in with the unit without. You always had this, say, curry or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to get back into the unit.
Okay. Now, did you have to go outside of the position? Was it for sanitary reasons, or
Yeah.
just? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I
You
mean,
didn't know, you just were supposed to do it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And you'd tell whoever you was in the foxhole with, or whoever you were in when you were taking a break. We're gonna go out here, or I'm going out here for.
Okay. And how would you get things like food or fresh water?
We got resupplied by helicopter, and we also got clothing that way too. If I remember, not much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember one time they dropped it through the jungle, and it was like a mad scramble to get clothes. And
So whatever-
I ended up with a shirt that didn't have any sleeves. Consequently, I got sunburned really bad.
Mhm. So did the package break open on the way down through the trees, and so you have clothes all over the place? Or
Yeah, I don't remember.
Or
that.
just you're scrambling to get it all out of it when it lands?
I think that's what happened. I don't remember.
Okay.
But,
Yeah. What do you eat out there?
Sea rations.
Okay. And for someone who doesn't know, what would be in a sea ration package?
Little cans of like pork and beans, lima beans, ham.
No, ham and limas, I think,
Ham
was
and
one of
limas
them.
was one of them. I don't remember what all they were, but none of them were very pleasing to the
Mhm.
taste.
All right.
Although we did get some, like hot sauce,
Mm-hmm.
Tabasco sauce. You could kind of liven them up a little
Right.
bit with that. It was pretty good that way, but.
Now, did you have any Vietnamese scouts with you?
Yeah, we did, and they were a great help, for the most part. I never figured out how they got in and out, because they seemed to be able to go and leave whenever they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And how they got there, I don't know. Unless they just jumped on one of the birds that came in.
Mm-hmm. And did you, so they were actually useful? What could they do for you?
Well, they could identify any kind of tracks, look for different kinds of explosives, tripwires, things like that, as well as if you captured someone, which I was never involved with that,
Mhm.
but we had one that was an interpreter that could
Mhm.
speak the language, and all of them could speak the language,
But they could also speak some English.
yeah,
Yeah.
very little, but some, yeah.
All right. And did you know anything about their background or how they wound up with you?
No.
Okay.
Well, one of them I did, at least the word was he'd been captured, he basically gave up, but he was a sapper.
Mhm.
He got caught trying to get a sapper charge into one of the bases,
Mm-hmm.
wherever that was.
Yeah.
I assume it was right up in our area, but
Okay. All right. So you have kind of your spell out there in the jungle, and then sometime in July they pull you out. And now where do you go?
Camp Evans
Okay.
to
And
the
what,
company headquarters.
okay. And what was your job there?
As the company clerk, you did all the morning reports, listened to all the radio traffic, tried to coordinate R&R leaves and get people in when they were supposed to deros, leave the country,
Mhm.
and just kind of keep everything running in the company, because our first sergeant was back there, but at the time I went back in, we got a new first sergeant, and he wanted to have a sergeant back there that could make sure that bunker detail was lined up, that people were doing what they were supposed to do, and because he wanted to be in the field part of the time,
Mm-hmm.
off and on. So that was another part of the detail that you had to do was, like I remember, guys would come back in and for an injury, you go to the hospital and check on them. You'd go see when they were going to be ready back, fit for duty, and get them back to the unit as convenient as you could, and then still have people in the back there to do the bunker detail, the perimeter guard at Evans for our sector,
Mm-hmm.
as well as we had KP that we had to send people on. Also had what we call the shit detail, burning the shit from the toilet.
Okay.
It was all a 55-gallon drum cut in half, and I don't remember how often we had to do that, but kind of depended on how many were in the rear at the time, I guess. But,
So you had to, based on it's mixed with diesel fuel or
Yeah.
something, and then you burn it off,
right.
which probably adds to the smell at that point. But okay.
Yeah.
Now, how many men from the company would normally be back in the base camp at any given time?
You know, I've thought about that a lot. I don't know that there probably was maybe 8 or 10
Mm-hmm.
from the field back there, and they'd be everything from going to sick call to returning from R&R, or going out to R&R, or waiting to deros,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, various things like that.
So how many bunkers were you responsible for?
I don't remember that,
Okay.
and I think it varied.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the whole battalion had a sector.
Okay.
And
So it wasn't just that your company was always stuck with a particular group
Right.
like that. Okay. Now, right after you leave, the company gets involved in some of the fighting at the very end of the stuff for Ripcord, and they go in to rescue a couple of different other companies there that were pinned down. Now, how much did you know about that stuff while it was happening?
I don't know that I knew a lot about what was going on. I know that the company had just came in, and at some points I thought that I came in with the company at that time, which was a couple of days prior to that. And then part of the unit was sent back out 2 days. I mean,
Right.
one day they couldn't get to them, the next day they went in and got them. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I knew some of that was going on. At the same time, I was trying to learn
Okay.
from the company clerk what to do.
Right. So it's all happening there at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So,
Okay. Now, after that, do things kind of settle down? You get into a more normal pattern?
yeah, you kind of got into a routine of the various things.
Okay.
The other thing I hated doing, I just absolutely hated to have to do it, was writing the letters for the captain to sign for the KIAs.
Mm-hmm.
And, but they had form letters, and I thought that was pretty impersonal, but it's the way they did it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, did you have many KIAs, or was it only an occasional thing now?
Yeah, I don't remember how many. There was more than I cared to remember, I guess.
Mhm.
I'm one of the shake and bake sergeants that came in with me that I was really good friends with that was killed on one of those.
Mhm.
And that kind of took a toll on.
Now, after Ripcord, were there any big firefights, or were these small contacts? And
I don't know what you call big firefights. There were some firefights. There was some contact off and on after Ripcord in various areas. It seemed like we'd get 122 rockets or mortars into Evans at least once a week, if not oftener. I can remember pretty vividly being able to get from my hooch, which was in the company, back of the company clerk or company office. I could get from there to the bunker from the time the first mortar hit the tube to the time I got in there before it got on the ground. So,
all right, so you developed pretty good reflexes.
You just didn't sleep real well. I didn't think. I guess.
All right. Now, what were conditions like on the base? I mean, what kind of facilities did you have, and what went on there?
They were basically thrown up tin shacks that kind of had a tin roof on them. Put sandbags up there to keep the wind from blowing the tin off.
And what kind of stuff did they have there for the men? What was available on a base that wouldn't be on a fire base or out in the field?
Well, you had to go in toward the main part of Camp Evans to get to like a barber or the PX or to the hospital or the medevac location. The helicopter pads for all the, as I recall, all the gunships was right behind our position on the base. And then there was the enlisted club and the NCO club and the officers club. And I never got to take much advantage of any of that.
Right. Did you have Vietnamese working on the base?
When I first went in, as I recall, we had Vietnamese working on the base. But by the time I was back there, I don't remember any Vietnamese working there.
Okay.
They were in the main part of the base.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
barbers and then the PX and
It's like that. All right. Now, one of the standard assumptions about Vietnam was that in the rear areas there were often a variety of problems that you didn't see as much of in the field. I mean, one of those would be drugs. I mean, were there people using drugs that you were aware of on the base?
Yep.
What were they using?
Mostly marijuana, but there was some heroin. I even was threatened by our own people with not say anything about the heroin use.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught one of the Kit Carson scouts coming back in from his long overstayed leave.
Mm-hmm.
He had a pretty good bag of cocaine on, or heroin, I don't know what
Mhm.
it was, white powder, with him, and I let the first sergeant know right away, and the MPs came and hauled him away.
Mm-hmm.
He threatened to kill me when he got back.
He actually came back?
He didn't come back. no.
Okay. Oh, he threatened to if he, yeah, okay.
As he was being hauled off by the MPs, he,
Right, yeah. Now, did the drugs affect people's performance or getting jobs done, or did the unit still function?
the unit still functioned, but there was just certain individuals that they would come back for sick leave or whatever,
Mhm.
and that was their hope. They would get hold of that stuff and just not show up for guard duty, and,
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff like that. So that was it affected the way the rear operated.
Okay.
I don't know about, I never saw it, I don't recall ever seeing it or hearing it. I heard some about it in the field, but for the most part, it was in the rear.
Right. Now, did you notice any kind of racial tensions in the rear?
Oh yeah, there was some, and it seemed to get worse as the year went by. I don't know if that was me mentally or if it was actually getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
But our company supply sergeant, Sergeant Hall, the black guy, and we're
Mhm.
still very good friends.
Mhm.
And I mean, he was excellent to work with.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a lot of what goes on is sort of comes over from the States.
Yeah.
So if they're already kind of militant in their attitudes at the point
Right.
when they're drafted, they come in with that chip on their shoulder. Somebody who's a sergeant and is sort of in the Army to a certain extent by choice may not view things the same way. And the same with drugs. You had people using drugs at home. They go to Vietnam, they use drugs.
Probably.
Well, some of them get introduced in Vietnam, but
Yeah, yeah.
they've studied it, and I guess things like levels of drug use were about the same among soldiers in Vietnam and young men of that age back home.
Right.
So, but we notice it, or it stands out in Vietnam for whatever reason. But so you're aware of that kind of thing, but basically the brigade still functions, the battalion still
Oh, yeah.
functions.
Yeah.
Things get done
Right.
regardless. Okay.
And I was more aware of it probably because I was involved in law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
all through college as a dispatcher, or
Mhm.
when I graduated, then I was permanently assigned with the Game and Fish as an enforcement officer. So I knew a little more about what was going on that way. I felt that I did. I don't know. Maybe I didn't know what was
Alright.
going on at all.
Yeah. Now, while you were there, did you get an R&R?
I did.
Where'd you go?
I went to Australia.
Okay. Now, was there kind of did you get a choice in that, or did you just take what was available?
You pretty much got a choice.
Mhm.
I mean, as a company clerk, I was assigning
Yeah.
who went where and when, so I got my choice.
Okay. So why did you go
But-
to Australia?
But and I tried to make sure that everybody got their choice.
Right. Okay. So why did you pick Australia?
It's because I didn't want to see any more Oriental folks.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And that's a place I'd always heard about. Thought I'd like to go see.
Okay. And how did people treat you in Australia?
Great. I mean, seemed like they just welcomed you
Mhm.
openly.
So you don't notice, sort of anti-war or anti-American sentiments there?
I did not. Maybe some did. And most of the guys I think went on R&R and just had a big 7-day or 10-day drunk and
Mm-hmm.
came back. And I wasn't a drinker to start with, so that didn't affect me that much. And I walked around Sydney for a couple of days, just looking at things.
Mhm.
And I run into the place called New South Wales Conservation Office.
Mm-hmm.
Best I can remember, that's what it was called, something like that anyway. And having been working as a wildlife officer in Wyoming, I thought, well, I'm going to just chat with somebody, you know. And they welcomed me, introduced me to a guy that was an investigator, had a similar job to what I had. He invited me to go home with him over the weekend. I mean, I had a weekend there, so I spent like 3 days with him and his family, probably over the 50-mile radius out of Sydney. But
Okay.
it was really interesting, and we kept in contact for a number of years afterwards, and then he finally died. But it was very interesting because I got to go out in the jungle or the
forest,
the forest with him, and saw a lot of different kinds of wildlife in Australia. So it was pretty interesting.
And nobody was going to shoot at you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how far into your tour was it when you did that, do you think?
About 3/4 of my way.
Okay. All right. Now, over the course of the time then when you're serving as company clerk, which is the bulk of your tour in Vietnam, as far as you could tell, was the overall situation in Vietnam changing, either the amount of combat going on or what the Americans were doing there?
Yeah, you kind of noticed the change to try and turn it over to the South Vietnamese Army. It wasn't as obvious up in I Corps. I didn't think as from what you read about, like down around Saigon and the islands and things like that. But and we got in some of the infantry guys from like the Air Marechal Division, the 4th Division. When they pulled out of Vietnam, these guys had been in country just a short time, so they had to be transferred somewhere else.
Right.
And that was a whole different experience.
All right. We were kind of closing out kind of your tour in Vietnam. Are there other particular things, if you think back to the time that you spent in Vietnam, are there other things that come to mind that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Other than trying to make sense, since I've tried to go through some of those after-action reports to try to put together where I was at before I got to the rear.
Yeah.
And I'm still confused.
Yeah. I mean, that's not...
I don't know when I went back to the rear for sure.
I mean, you'd have to find the actual orders for that someplace.
I don't think they wrote any orders for that. I don't know.
And they will not have, or it's in some obscure archive someplace.
Or even what all I did in the rear as the company clerk. I mean, a lot of people I think thought that you just went back there and put your feet up on the desk, kind of like the picture I've got down there with the whiskey bottle at Christmas time. And actually, that wasn't even my package. That was the first sergeant's package. And we took that picture just as a joke. And so
they get the line about being in the rear with the sergeant in the gear, and you get to be, well, your company clerk, but you're a sergeant. But anyway, I guess, how did you understand your job? What did you think your purpose was?
In the rear?
Yeah.
I thought I took it seriously, and I knew how to do all the morning reports and get on the radio and talk with the company commander, whoever I needed to talk with, and let him know what the status of the company was from my perspective, and what supplies were needed, and get that information to the supply sergeant, as well as see who needed it, and know who was coming back in to the rear, so I could make sure they got where they needed to go, like to the medevac or wherever. I mean,
Did you have any dealings with replacements who came in? When they came into process, did you talk to them?
Oh, sure, yeah, you tried to pump them up and get them assigned where they knew they were needed or wanted. And sometimes I had no control on where they were going to go just because of casualties from the field, whether it was KIAs or wounded. So.
Yeah, so you kind of look after them at least a little bit too.
Yeah, and all of us in the rear, there wasn't that many of us in the rear. There's for like the first sergeant, the mail clerk, and the supply sergeant were basically 4 of us in the rear to run the rear. And once in a while, one of the lieutenants would be in there. But between that and then the S3s or the the battalion headquarters, tried to coordinate all that. So
you did a lot pretty much on your own.
you did, and I was used to working that way anyway from my experiences
Right.
from college through to my job before I got drafted.
Okay. Now, how much advance notice did you have in terms of when you were actually going home? I mean, you're supposed to be there a year, but it's not always on that date.
I don't remember how much advance notice I had, but it was basically a month drop. Might have been 20 days, it might have been 31. I don't remember exactly, but I don't think we got that notification very quickly or in time to make any plans. And it's the same for all the people out in the field. That I would get those notices and then try to get them back to the rear so they could go out.
So somebody higher up is sending the notices for everybody, including you, when it's your day to leave.
Right.
Okay. So when you do get notified, now what happens to you?
It seems like, I knew ahead enough that I wrote a letter to the chief game warden in Wyoming to let him know that I was due to get out this day, and I'd be more than happy to come back to work at that time as soon after as I got there, and then I wanted to go back to the same position, same job.
Okay. And what's the process for getting you out of Vietnam and out of the Army?
Well, of course you had to have your orders to start with, and then we flew. First you had to check out of the company, then you had to check out of the battalion, and then you had to check out of the division, and then you flew to Nha Trang, I think, and then on to Saigon and back to the States.
And where did you land in the States?
In Seattle.
Okay.
Fort Ord, Washington.
And what do they do with you for out processing there?
Oh, I don't remember much except the paperwork.
Okay.
Everybody seemed to think you got an exit physical and all that. I don't remember anything about an exit physical.
Do you remember a steak dinner?
No.
Okay. That was supposed to be one of the customs. There are some guys talking
They
about
may
that.
have. If it was a bird steak.
Yeah.
I didn't
It didn't register.
I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Did they give you a new uniform?
Yeah, you got new uniforms with all your awards supposedly on it.
All right. Did they make any effort to get you to re-enlist?
Oh yeah.
And do they seem to be actually interested in that, or were they just doing it because they had to?
I don't know, but that was an ongoing process. Even when you were in Vietnam, there was always talk about that.
Yeah. Do you think were you getting offers specifically because of what you knew how to do and the kind of job you were doing, or just everybody got that?
Just trying to meet a quota, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. And did they warn you about anti-war protesters?
No,
Okay.
not that I recall.
Now, when you went home, did you go in uniform?
I did.
Okay. And-
Because I could fly standby.
Right.
cheaper rate.
Sure, okay. And then in the airports or any place, did you get hassled at all, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens?
Particularly in Seattle.
Okay.
I mean, I just remember flower children all around just kind of taunting you. And
Mm-hmm. Now, were they right in your face, or were they kept back from you?
some of them would get in your face. Most of them didn't. It seemed like they picked out the ones of us that had the infantry, you know, the blue braid and combat infantry badge, and they knew enough that you had actually saw combat.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe killed somebody, or maybe not, but they didn't know.
Okay,
They just picked you out.
all right. And but they weren't physically blocking you, they were just coming.
I don't remember any physical blocking.
Okay.
I remember getting pretty close and
Mm-hmm.
calling you names and stuff, and I just
So-
kind of ignored them and went on.
Were there police or security around any place that?
I assume there were. I don't remember that.
Okay. Now, was that at all a surprise to you, or were you assuming you were going to run into that?
It was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't expect that. I don't think when
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been. You know, I'd read about it happening. But not going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it did.
Yeah. All right. And then, so now, do you get your job back when you get home?
No.
Okay. So what does happen?
They had, in the meantime, in that month or so, when I told them I was gonna get out, they'd hired somebody out of the main office to do that job, and they gave me a temporary assignment in the central part of the state, in Casper, as a deputy game warden, and I was to work with the game wardens and do whatever the supervisor in the district office wanted done, which was mostly mow the grass and water the trees. And,
Mm-hmm. So how long did you do that?
you know, it must have been about a month,
Okay.
maybe a month, maybe not quite a month, but I was working actively with the wardens because I knew the two that were there, and I went out and did everything from patrol to watercraft
Mm-hmm.
enforcement to public relations with them, and one time we had a night patrols that we were working, and we were working till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and so I slept in a little bit, come to work the next morning, and the supervisor told me that we came to work around here at 8 o'clock. Not in those kind of terms, but not so nice of terms. And I just told him I thought that I didn't know that the game wardens had set hours like that, and sorry. And he in no uncertain terms told me that it was like I was like all the rest of the sons of bitches come back from Vietnam, and the world owed you a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to walked away from him. That within 2 hours I had a call from the chief game warden transferring me to Green River, clerk across the state. And the next day I took one of the vehicles and was on the way to Green River to find a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
Which the supervisor down there said, I don't know why they're sending you down here, there's no place to live. So en route I stopped in Rawlins at the sheriff's department, whom I knew the sheriff there real well, and stopped to have a cup of coffee and
Mm-hmm.
just make acquaintances, which I knew several of the officers in that area. And he had previously offered me a job when I first got out,
Mhm.
and he said, I still have that opening. I said, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went to Green River. I turned around, went back to Casper, and then I started as a deputy sheriff for
Okay. And then
in Rawlins.
okay, then did that become a long-term thing for you?
It did. I was with the sheriff department for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for unknown reasons, I went back to work for the Game and Fish as an investigator for another 30.
Okay, but you're coming back under better circumstances than when you left.
Yeah.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the Army, how do you think that affected you positively or negatively, or what did you learn from it?
Well, I think you learn patience more than anything, and how to take orders, or when to take orders.
Mm-hmm. All right. I guess to look back on it, I mean, would you do it again if that was the situation?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't skip out and go to Canada.
Right.
I mean, I've lived in the country enough that I would do that.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to share your story today.
Sure.